Welcome to the world headquarters of the Mass Preacher, broadcasting from somewhere partially underground on this continent. I entitled my teaching this morning, Passing the Baton. 2 Kings 2, verses 8 through 10. And Elijah took his mantle and wrapped it together and smote the waters, and they were divided hither and thither, so that the two went over on dry ground. And it came to pass, when they were gone over, that Elijah said unto Elijah, Ask what I shall do for thee, before I be taken away from thee. And Elijah said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. And he said, Thou hast asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken from thee, it shall be so unto thee. But if not, it shall not be so. This short teaching, I can't begin to go in depth on this, but 2 Kings chapter 1 and chapter 2 is really fascinating. Discipleship. In the city where the world headquarters of the Mass Preacher is, there was this restaurant. And I never really went there very much, and it was closed down because the man wanted to retire, and there actually been a number of businesses here locally that now just want to retire. And what was sad about these businesses that were doing well, were helping the community, is they did not pass along their mantle, if you will, their vision. Here, this word mantle is it's like an overcoat, and it's the poor people would wear this, and but this picture here of Elijah throwing it, this mantle, and two, in this story there's this agreement. The one is willing to be discipled, willing to partake of this other person's mantle. But it was hard. It was a hard thing. He was asking, it was going to be a hard thing to fulfill it. When God gives a person a dream, a revelation, a dream for a business, a dream for a church, it's hard for someone to step in and who hasn't been, I don't like the word groomed, trained, who has the same vision, who's willing to have that vision imparted into them. Now, you can hand somebody off. There's a book I heard of called Splitting Hairs, H-E-I-R-S. And what's sad about the book is it's these stories about people who have gotten inheritances. Now, the people who received the inheritance in these books just destroyed the companies they took and the wealth they took, because they wanted no impartation of this individual, of what this person had to become this great business. The person that was legally inheriting it had no desire. It was a spirit of greed that grabbed the hold of their mind. And as a consequence, they couldn't make it succeed. There was a church, and I've talked about a lot in my YouTubes, in the city where I used to live, mega church, charismatic. At the time, I didn't realize what probably the best overall church I've ever been, even though I didn't agree with every position they had. Well, when that pastor left, the board and the posse running it picked an individual that drove it from thousands to, I don't know, 300 or 400. And then when he left, I remember I came to one of the trustees who I knew, and I said, Brother so-and-so, I was sitting in the service when the pastor announced his resignation to the people that was left that he hadn't driven out. And so I said, brother, God has given me a word. 1 Corinthians about being unequally yoked. Deuteronomy 22:10. You don't have a donkey and an ox plow together, and you've brought in someone who is taking this from a charismatic church to a liturgy thing. You know, don't mess with people. You need a very, very special person. He smiled, he laughed. I told another trustee I didn't really know, only by name and face was seeing him being introduced as a trustee. And both these people laughed at me, did the opposite, and they appointed someone who drove this thing into the ground and closed the doors. And it didn't end bad, worse. That wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it is, this third guy was desperately, now remember, this was a church of thousands of people, millions of dollars in the bank, property paid for. I mean, the covers were jammed full. And yeah, there were problems there like any church, but man, anybody with half a brain who was a minister would have loved to walk into a situation like that. So now this third guy, he gives it over to another church who came in and destroyed any recognition of what the original church was. And it's funny, but one of the first things they did in the sanctuary had verses written when it was built around the walls. Well, they were so offended, I mean, I have no idea. They ripped those suckers off. And I still would like to know the reason for that. And so this third guy got hired on. Now, I don't know about you, and I've said this in a number of my YouTube teachings, if you came to the mass preacher and gave me a building worth millions of dollars, paid for, gave me the keys of the car, I would build a statue of you in front of it and give you a job for life. Well, this fourth hoser to come along, he eventually kicks out, runs out, or mutual leaving. He gets this building given to him and then vaporizes any memory of that former church. Welcome to some of the churches in America. And in closing, if you have a vision, if you have a library, if you have antique cars, if you have something that's a part of your life, you need to be planning for when you pass away on how to ensure that will go. Maybe if you have some antique cars and you don't have any relatives, children you can trust, then maybe what you ought to do is find a museum for that to carry on. Because otherwise, because when you go, man, it's a feeding frenzy, like in Christmas Carol. When old Scrooge kicks the bucket, they're in there confiscating his goods, blankets and whatever they could snag. And that's what it's going to be when you die. Will you pass the baton on? I have things in my life, and I've been contemplating that. And I don't know. I don't have an answer. But I'm actively praying, Lord, to pass on things, the baton. I don't know how that's going to work. But it's in my mind. I encourage you, if you have anything that's special, if you have a stamp collection, don't leave it to chance. Let that be known in a will, a trust, whatever the legal things are. But do it. Because if you don't, it won't get done. Even if you just verbalize it, doesn't guarantee it will be done. Lord, I pray for everybody that we all have something that we have. Every human being, Lord, has something to pass on to somebody else, whether it's in the way of something physical, something spiritual. I pray that all the people listening, can be put with somebody who has a willingness to receive the impartation of what is being imparted and not to destroy it. I'm praying for a revelation of the person imparting to find people who they can impart it to, and then people who are willing, and for these marriages to take place where things can be passed along. Not just physical things, but even spiritual ideas. Even callings of ministry where there's a preacher in a family in every generation that they would find people to pass that mantle along. We all must be thinking about that. In Jesus' name. There was a ministry, pastor of a church, had a radio ministry, and I had contacted his organization about this vision, this revelation for that ministry. And about, is there someone to disciple? Is there someone to pass the baton? And I actually got a hold of somebody who, I guess, sort of filled that bill. But his answer to me was, well, brother so-and-so is in good health and everything's going good, and so, we're really not worried about it. And that was just the gist of the letter. Well, he croaked a few years later, not that long later, and the whole thing came to an end. Because there was nobody there to receive the impartation, who was willing, who saw the vision, who saw the revelation, to be humble enough and say, to take this and go. So, don't take this lightly, my pastor friends. Don't take this lightly. Signing off from somewhere, partially on the ground, mass preacher, bids you good night.